The first time I understood how much of myself had disappeared into my marriage, I was sitting inside a travel agency with a pen in my hand. The form wasn't complicated. Name, address, phone number, emergency contact. I had filled out hundreds of forms like it over the years. Then I reached one little box, traveling with. My hand stopped. For 52 years, the answer had been automatic. Robert Mercer, my husband, the man who complained about hotel pillows, refused to ask for directions and somehow packed 3 pairs of shoes for a 2-day trip. Robert had been dead for 14 months. I knew that. Of course I knew it. Still, seeing that empty line made something inside me tighten. The woman behind the desk waited politely. "You can leave that blank," she finally said. I nodded. Of course, but I didn't continue. My friend Nancy had convinced me to consider a 3-day autumn bus trip through New England. She had already chosen the seat she wanted. She had studied the hotel. She had even circled the restaurant where she planned to order lobster. Nancy was ready. I wasn't. I stared at that empty line until the letters above it became blurry. Traveling with. Nobody. That was the answer. And suddenly the trip seemed impossible. Not because I was afraid of buses. Not because I couldn't manage a hotel room. I simply couldn't picture myself going anywhere without Robert. Eventually I placed the pen on the desk. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think I need more time." The woman smiled kindly. "There's no rush." I thanked her and left. Outside, I sat in my car without starting the engine. People crossed the parking lot carrying shopping bags. A delivery truck backed toward a store. Someone pushed a stroller past my windshield. Ordinary life continued around me. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and a question came to me that I had avoided for more than a year. If Robert was gone, who exactly was left? My name is Helen Mercer. I'm 78 years old. Robert and I were married for 52 years. People hear a number like that and sometimes imagine a great romance. Ours wasn't the kind people write books about. We didn't dance in the kitchen every night. We didn't leave love notes on pillows. We certainly didn't agree about everything. Robert could be stubborn. So could I. He believed a thermostat should never be touched after October. I believed 70 degrees was not an unreasonable request. He collected tools he didn't need. I bought decorative pillows he couldn't understand. Whenever we traveled, Robert insisted he knew where he was going. He often didn't. I would sit beside him holding a map and wait. Eventually he would say, "This road wasn't here last time." That was Robert's way of admitting we were lost. I usually let him have it. We met when I was 22. He was 25. A friend introduced us at a church picnic. Robert talked for most of the first conversation. I barely said anything. Years later, he claimed my quietness made me mysterious. The truth was simpler. I was shy. Robert wasn't. He could talk to a cashier, a mechanic, or someone sitting beside him in a waiting room. Within 10 minutes, he knew their hometown and what their children did for work. I admired that about him. He admired that I noticed things he missed. We balanced each other. At least that was how I thought about it. We married 2 years later. Our first apartment was tiny. The kitchen floor sloped toward the refrigerator. The bathroom door wouldn't close completely. We had almost no money. Yet I remember those years with enormous tenderness. Everything felt unfinished, including us. We were learning how to be married while learning how to be adults. Our daughter Caroline arrived 3 years later. Beth came 4 years after that. Life became busy. Robert worked for a building supply company. I stayed home when the girls were little. Later, I began working part-time at a flower shop. I loved that job, more than I ever admitted. Flowers made sense to me, not because they were beautiful, because every stem had its own shape. You couldn't force them all to behave the same way. Some needed height, some needed space. Some looked ordinary until you placed them beside the right thing. I liked finding that balance. Robert used to tease me about it. You spend all day arranging flowers that are going to die. And you sell lumber people hide inside walls. That usually ended the argument. I worked at the shop for 27 years, 3 days a week at first, later 4. It never became a career in the way people use that word, but it belonged to me. Then the girls grew up. Caroline married. Beth moved away for graduate school and eventually settled 2 hours from us. Robert retired at 67. I kept working another year. Then one evening we were eating dinner when Robert said, "Why don't you retire too?" I looked at him. "Why?" "So we can do things." "What things?" "I don't know. That's the point." He wanted to travel. He wanted to visit the girls more. He wanted mornings without schedules. I liked the idea, so I retired. For the next 11 years, our lives became even more intertwined. We went everywhere together. The grocery store, doctor appointments, family visits, restaurants, road trips, even errands that didn't require 2 people somehow involved both of us. Robert drove. I navigated. Robert handled the hotel reservations. I packed everything he forgot. When people asked about our plans, I answered automatically. "We're going to Virginia. We're thinking about repainting the kitchen. We might visit Caroline in June." We. Always we. I never thought there was anything wrong with that word. There wasn't. I loved being Robert's wife. I still do. The problem was something I didn't notice until much later.
Somewhere inside all those years of we, I had stopped asking very many questions about I.
What restaurant did I want? Anything is fine. Where did I want to travel? Wherever Robert wanted to go. What did I want to do Saturday? I don't know. What are you thinking? None of those decisions felt important. Marriage is full of compromise. That's normal. But habits accumulate quietly. You don't notice them because they arrive one at a time. Then one day, you look around and realize they've furnished the whole room. Robert became sick during the winter. At first, we thought it was something minor. He was tired. He lost his appetite. He complained about a pain beneath his ribs. Robert rarely complained about pain. That frightened me more than I admitted. Tests followed. Then specialists. Then words we weren't prepared to hear. Our world became smaller very quickly.
Trips disappeared.
Restaurants disappeared. Our calendar filled with medical appointments. I learned the names of medications I wish I had never needed to know. Robert lost weight. His hands changed. That bothered me strangely. I had known those hands for more than 50 years. They had built shelves, fixed faucets, held babies, carried groceries, reached across restaurant tables for mine. Near the end, they looked unfamiliar. One evening I sat beside his bed while he slept. His hand rested on the blanket. I placed mine over it. He opened his eyes. "You all right?" he asked. That was Robert. He was dying, and he wanted to know whether I was all right. "I'm fine." He gave me a tired smile. "You've always been a terrible liar." I smiled too. Neither of us said anything else. He died 3 weeks later. The first months afterward were strangely busy. People imagine grief as sitting alone and crying. There was some of that. But there was also paperwork. So much paperwork. Insurance forms, medical bills, bank accounts, thank you cards, phone calls, closets, the funeral home. Caroline and Beth stayed with me as much as they could. Neighbors brought casseroles. People sent flowers. I remember looking around the house one afternoon and thinking that Robert would have laughed at the number of arrangements. "You could open your own shop again," he would have said. For a while, being busy protected me. There was always another task. Then the tasks began disappearing. The sympathy cards stopped arriving. The casseroles ended. The girls returned to their lives. The house became mine. That was when grief changed. The worst moments were not dramatic. They were ordinary. I made coffee for 2 people. Not once, many times. My hand simply remembered before my mind did. I would fill the machine, take down 2 mugs, and then stare at them. Eventually, I started using Robert's mug. It seemed wasteful not to. He had a dark blue one with a chipped handle. I still use it sometimes. At the grocery store, I kept buying his cereal. Robert ate the same cereal for 30 years. I never liked it. One morning, several months after he died, I opened the pantry. There were 3 boxes. I stood there laughing. Then I cried. I didn't know which reaction made more sense, so I did both. Television was worse. Something funny would happen, and I would turn toward his chair. Robert, look at... Then nothing. I did that for months. The first few times it broke me. Later it simply hurt. His recliner remained beside the window. Nobody sat there. Caroline suggested moving it. I said no. Beth suggested replacing it with something smaller. I said no again. They stopped asking. The bedroom stayed exactly the same. Robert's side table still held an old reading lamp. His slippers remained in the closet. I had donated most of his clothes, but not everything. A brown sweater stayed hanging near the back. I couldn't explain why. It wasn't even my favorite. Maybe I didn't need a reason. The house became a strange place. It was full of Robert, yet Robert wasn't there. For the first year, I thought that was my problem. I believed grief meant learning how to live in a house without my husband. Eventually, I discovered something more complicated. I didn't know how to live there as myself. That realization came over Chinese food. It sounds ridiculous, but many important things in life arrive through ridiculous moments. One evening, I didn't want to cook. I found a takeout menu in a kitchen drawer. I thought about ordering Chinese. Robert disliked Chinese food. He didn't hate it. He simply preferred Italian. For 52 years, if we ordered takeout, we usually ordered Italian. I picked up the phone. Then I thought, Robert would want lasagna. I actually stood there considering Italian food. Robert had been dead almost a year. I wanted Chinese. There was nobody else in the house. Nobody to compromise with. Nobody to disappoint. I could order anything I wanted. That should have felt freeing. Instead, I began crying. I sat at the kitchen table with the menu in front of me. It wasn't about food. I suddenly realized how many preferences in my life had become shared preferences. Maybe that happens in long marriages. You stop remembering where one person ends and the other begins. Which movies did I like? Which restaurants? What temperature did I prefer the house? What did I want to do on vacation? I knew what we liked. I wasn't always sure what I liked. That frightened me. Eventually, I ordered Chinese. I chose something Robert never would have eaten. It was too spicy. I didn't even like it very much, but I ate every bite. A few weeks later, Nancy asked me to lunch. Nancy Brooks and I had known each other for years. She was nothing like me. She had been divorced for 20 years. She lived alone. She traveled alone when nobody could join her. She once drove 6 hours to attend a concert because she wanted to hear a singer nobody else cared about. I couldn't imagine doing that. Nancy didn't try to fix my grief. That was one reason I liked being with her. Some people became uncomfortable when I mentioned Robert. They changed the subject. Others wanted to reassure me. You'll feel better eventually. Nancy did neither. If I talked about Robert, she listened. If I didn't, she didn't force it. That afternoon, we were eating sandwiches when she asked me something. What did you like before, Robert? I laughed. What kind of question is that? A question. That was 56 years ago. I'm serious. I thought she was being ridiculous. Then I tried to answer. I remembered music. I remembered reading. Then flowers came to mind. The shop, I said. Nancy leaned forward. You loved that place. I did. Why did you stop? I retired. I know. Why? I shrugged. Robert retired. We wanted more time together. Did you stop loving flowers? No. Then why are you talking about them like they died too? I looked at her. Nancy took another bite of her sandwich. She had no idea what she had just done. Or perhaps she did. I changed the subject. but the question followed me home. Why was I talking about them like they died too? A week later, I drove past the old flower shop. I had passed it many times. That day, I slowed down. The sign had changed. The awning was different. For several minutes, I sat in the parking lot. Then I went inside. The smell reached me first. Green stems, damp leaves, fresh flowers. It's difficult to describe that smell if you've never worked around them. It isn't perfume. It's earthier than that. It felt familiar. A young woman stood behind the counter. She couldn't have been older than 35. Can I help you? I'm just looking. I wandered toward the arrangements. The shop had changed. Different shelves, different register. More plants than we used to carry. Near the back, several arrangements were being prepared. The young woman was clearly overwhelmed. Someone called from the cooler. The phone rang. A delivery driver appeared. For a moment, I was back at work. I knew that kind of chaos. One arrangement on the counter caught my eye. White roses, hydrangeas, eucalyptus. Something was wrong with it. I stared. Then, without thinking, I reached forward. I moved 2 stems, turned the vase slightly, removed one piece of greenery. There, I whispered. The young woman had been watching me. You've done this before. I felt embarrassed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched it. No, it looks better. I smiled. I worked here years ago. Her face changed. Wait, are you Helen? That surprised me. Yes, Martha talks about you. Martha had worked with me near the end. Apparently she still came in occasionally. The young woman's name was Maya. She had bought the shop 3 years earlier. We talked for 20 minutes. She asked about the old owners. I asked about the business. Before I left, Maya said, if you ever want a few hours of work, I could use experienced hands on Thursdays. I laughed. I'm retired. So are half the people who help me. I don't need a job. I didn't say you did. That answer stayed with me. I thanked her. Then I left. Driving home, I realized something strange. For perhaps 20 minutes, I hadn't thought of myself as Robert's widow. I hadn't thought about grief. I hadn't wondered whether the girls were worried about me. I had looked at flowers. I had moved 2 stems. I had been useful in a way that belonged to an older part of myself. For 20 minutes, I had simply been Helen. The following Thursday, I returned. I told myself I was only going to visit. Maya handed me an apron. That's sneaky, I said. You came on Thursday. I came to say hello. Say hello while trimming those roses. I stayed 3 hours. The next week I stayed 4. I told Maya it wasn't permanent. She nodded as though she didn't believe me. Soon, Thursday mornings belonged to the shop. I didn't tell my daughters. That wasn't deliberate at first. Then I realized I liked having something that was mine before it became family information. That sounds small. It wasn't. At the shop, nobody asked whether I was eating enough. Nobody reminded me to lock the doors. Nobody asked whether I was lonely. Maya asked whether the arrangement needed more height. A customer asked whether yellow roses were appropriate for an anniversary. Someone asked me to choose ribbon. These were decisions, small ones, but they were mine. One Thursday I made an arrangement with yellow roses and eucalyptus. I added small white flowers around the edges. Then I stepped back. For a second, I almost wondered whether Robert would like it. I stopped myself. Did I like it? Yes. A woman entered 20 minutes later. She walked directly toward the arrangement. That's beautiful. She bought it. I watched her carry it through the door. Something warm moved through me. Pride. I hadn't felt it in a long time. Not pride in our daughters. Not pride in something Robert had repaired. Not pride in our marriage, surviving difficult years. Pride in something I had done. I almost felt guilty. That feeling surprised me. Why should being proud of myself feel disloyal? I didn't have an answer. So I kept arranging flowers. Caroline discovered my secret by accident. She called the shop looking for me. I had left my phone at home, Maya answered. That evening, Caroline called again. You're working? Her voice sounded almost offended. 4 hours on Thursdays. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think I needed permission. I didn't say you did. You sounded like it. There was silence. Caroline took a breath. Mom, you don't need to work. I know. Then why are you doing it? Because I like it. You're 78. I'm aware. I just don't want you exhausting yourself. I'm arranging flowers, Caroline. I'm not digging highways. She didn't laugh. Neither did I. The conversation tightened. Finally, Caroline said something that changed everything. I'm trying to take care of you because Dad isn't here. I stopped. Neither of us spoke. I knew what she meant. She loved me. She was worried. She had watched her father die. She had watched me become a widow. Somewhere along the way, Caroline had inherited a responsibility she thought Robert had left behind. Take care of Mom. The problem wasn't Caroline. The problem was that I had begun thinking the same way. Without Robert, I was someone who needed managing, someone fragile, someone incomplete. I sat down. Caroline, what? I miss your father every day. Her voice softened. I know, but I'm still here. The words came out before I had fully understood them. Caroline started crying. Then I did too. I'm sorry, Mom. You don't need to be. I just worry. I know. I don't know how to do this without Dad either. That sentence broke something open between us. Of course she didn't. Robert wasn't only my husband. He was her father. We were all trying to learn new roles. After we hung up, I remained at the table. I'm still here. I repeated the words quietly.
For more than a year, I had thought surviving meant not dying.
Eating, sleeping, paying bills, keeping appointments. But perhaps being alive required something else. Perhaps I was allowed to keep becoming someone. That frightened me. It also felt strangely hopeful. The first thing I changed was a wall. Our dining room had been beige for 23 years. Robert liked beige. He called it neutral. I called it the color of oatmeal. We had discussed repainting several times. I wanted green. Robert said green would make the room look like a hospital, so beige remained. One Saturday, I went to the hardware store. I stood in front of hundreds of paint samples. Immediately, I reached for beige. Habit. Then I laughed at myself. I chose pale green. At home, I painted one wall. Halfway through, I panicked. It looked terrible, too bright, too different. I imagined Robert walking in. What have you done? I almost painted over it. Instead, I went to bed. The next morning, sunlight came through the dining room window. It landed across the green wall. The color softened. I stood there with my coffee. I liked it, so I left it. A week later, I moved one chair closer to the window. Then I bought a ceramic bowl, bright blue, completely impractical. Robert would have hated it. That thought made me smile. None of those changes erased him. His recliner remained. His photograph stayed beside my bed. The brown sweater remained in the closet. But the house slowly stopped feeling like a room where time had been interrupted. It began moving again. So did I. Thursday mornings became my favorite part of the week. Maya eventually stopped asking whether I was coming. She simply expected me. Sometimes I worked 3 hours, sometimes 5. I learned the names of younger employees. They learned that I hated glitter ribbon. One of them, Sophie, asked me about marriage one afternoon. She had recently become engaged. 52 years, she said. How do you stay married that long? I almost gave her some wise answer. Patience, communication, compromise. Instead, I laughed. Sometimes you stay married because you're both too stubborn to leave. She stared at me. Then she laughed too. I told her the truth. Some years were wonderful. Some were hard. Sometimes Robert understood me better than anyone. Sometimes he didn't understand me at all. There were days I adored him. There were days I wanted him to stop talking. Love wasn't one feeling stretched across 52 years. It was thousands of choices, some beautiful, some ordinary, some difficult. Remembering the difficult parts helped me. For a while after Robert died, grief had polished him. Memory removed every irritation, every argument, every bad habit. It turned our marriage into something almost sacred, but that wasn't our marriage. Robert was human. So was I. Remembering that made loving him feel warmer, less like worshiping a ghost, more like missing my husband. Summer passed. Then September came. One afternoon, Nancy called. Guess what I booked? I knew immediately. The New England trip. The New England trip. I'm happy for you. You're coming. Nancy. Helen. I haven't decided. You've had a year. She was right. I had thought about that travel form many times. The empty line still bothered me. Traveling with. I imagined Robert beside me. He would complain about the bus schedule. He would buy some useless souvenir. He would insist on taking photographs where I looked directly into the sun. I missed him before I had even gone. But another thought had begun appearing beside the grief. I wanted to see the leaves. That was new. Not we wanted. I wanted. 2 days later, I returned to the travel agency. It wasn't the same woman behind the desk. That helped. I asked about the trip. There were still seats available. She placed the registration form in front of me. I filled in my name, Helen Mercer, address, phone number, emergency contact, Caroline. Then I reached the line. Traveling with. My hand stopped again. The same words. The same little empty space. This time, I didn't feel crushed. I thought about Nancy. She was coming. So I wrote, Nancy Brooks. Then I stared at it. Something didn't feel right. Nancy wasn't Robert's replacement. I wasn't going because Nancy made me complete. I wasn't traveling as half of another pair. I crossed out her name. The agent looked over. Did you make a mistake? I'm not sure. She waited. I pointed at the line. Can I put myself? She looked slightly confused. You mean you're traveling alone? No. My friend is on the trip. Then you can put her. I know. I looked down at the form. This may sound silly. She smiled. I've heard many things at this desk. I took a breath. I think I'd like to put my own name. The woman looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded. Of course. So I wrote it. Helen Mercer. My handwriting shook slightly. I stared at those 2 words. Nothing followed them. No wife of, no widow of, no mother of, no traveling companion. Just Helen Mercer. For the first time in a very long while, my own name felt complete. The trip took place 3 weeks later. I nearly canceled twice. The night before, I stood in the bedroom looking at my suitcase. Robert's suitcase was still in the closet. For years, we had packed side by side. He always forgot something, usually socks. Once, his belt. I almost heard him asking whether I had packed the phone charger. For a few minutes, I sat on the bed. Grief doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply sits down beside you. I let it. Then I finished packing. The next morning, Nancy arrived before sunrise. She honked outside. I opened the door. Don't honk at 6 in the morning. You weren't answering your phone. I was locking the door. Are you ready? No. Yes. We left. The first day was easier than I expected. The bus was comfortable. Nancy talked to everyone. Of course she did. By lunch, she knew the driver's marital history. I sat near the window. For several hours, I watched the landscape change. There were moments when I forgot to be nervous. That surprised me. On the second day, we stopped at a scenic overlook. The trees stretched across the hills in red, orange, and gold. The sky was painfully blue. Everyone got off the bus. People took photographs. Nancy walked ahead. I stayed near the railing. The view was beautiful. My first thought came instantly. Robert would have loved this. The grief was so sudden that I gripped the railing. I could picture him beside me, hands in his jacket pocket, looking out over the hills. He would have said something simple. "Well, would you look at that?" That was the kind of thing Robert said when something truly impressed him. My eyes filled. For a moment, guilt followed. I was there. He wasn't. I was seeing something we had once talked about seeing together. Part of me wanted to turn away. Nancy came back. "You okay?" I nodded. Then I shook my head. Then I laughed at myself. I wish Robert could see this. Nancy stood beside me. She didn't say anything. I looked at the hills again. The wind moved through the trees. A bird crossed the valley. "But I'm glad I can," I said. Nancy touched my arm. "So am I." We stayed there another few minutes. Then we walked back toward the bus. Nothing miraculous happened. I didn't leave my grief at that overlook. I brought it home. But something else came home with me. A photograph. In it, I'm standing near the railing. My hair is being blown across my face. Nancy took the picture before I was ready. I'm not looking at the camera. I'm looking toward the hills. When I returned home, I printed it. For several days, I wasn't sure where to put it. Eventually, I placed it on a table near Robert's photograph. For a moment, that felt wrong. Then I understood why. One photograph represented a life I loved. The other represented a life I was still living. There was room for both. These days, people sometimes ask whether I'm moving on. I've never liked that expression. It sounds as though Robert is somewhere behind me. He isn't. 52 years don't move behind you. They become part of the person who keeps walking. I still talk to him occasionally. Not long conversations. Usually complaints. "You would not believe what they charged for this." Or, "Your daughter is being stubborn again." Sometimes I tell him something funny. I don't know whether anyone hears me. That isn't really the point. Robert is woven into the way I understand the world. I don't want to remove that, but I no longer believe loving him requires me to remain exactly as I was on the day he died. That was the mistake I made. For more than a year, I preserved everything. The chair, the room, the routines, even preferences that weren't mine. I thought changing them meant changing what he had meant to me. Now I understand love isn't that fragile. The dining room wall is still green. I added another green wall 6 months later. Caroline came over and stared at it. "Dad would hate this." "I know." We both laughed. That laughter felt good, not disrespectful. Good. Robert's recliner is still beside the window. I sometimes sit in it now. For the first year I couldn't. It felt like his. Then one winter afternoon, sunlight fell across the seat. I wanted to read there. So I sat down. Nothing terrible happened. I didn't erase him. I simply discovered that chairs can hold more than one person's life. The flower shop remains part of my week. Maya now calls me her Thursday rescue crew. I tell her I want a promotion. She tells me I already receive unlimited coffee. Last month, a young man came in looking terrified. He wanted flowers for his wife. They had been married 1 year. "What does she like?" I asked. "I don't know." I laughed. "You'd better learn." He looked even more frightened, so I helped him. After he left, I thought about Robert. He knew I loved tulips. He also knew I disliked red roses. He forgot our anniversary once. I reminded him of that mistake for 27 years. That was us. Not perfect. Real. And strangely, the more I allow myself to remember Robert as a real man, the easier it becomes to remember myself as a real woman. Not only his widow, not only his wife, Helen. I had existed before Robert. I existed beside Robert. And somehow, even when I didn't notice her, Helen existed inside all those years of we. I don't regret them. If someone offered me another 52 years with Robert, including the arguments and bad directions, I would take them immediately. But I understand something now that I couldn't understand after he died. A long marriage can become a language. You speak it so fluently that you stop hearing the individual words. We, ours, together. Those words were beautiful to me. They still are. But there was always another word inside them. I. Learning to say it again felt selfish at first, then frightening, then unfamiliar. Now it simply feels true. Last spring I bought tulips for my kitchen table, bright pink ones. Robert never liked pink flowers. He said they looked artificial even when they weren't. I arranged them in a white vase. Then I moved them twice. The second arrangement was better. I carried the vase to the table. For a moment, I imagined Robert looking at them. Too pink, Helen. I smiled. Yes, they are. I left them there. The morning sun came through the window. It touched the green dining room wall. Robert's old chair sat nearby. My travel photograph rested on the table beside his picture. Nothing competed. Nothing needed to disappear. That surprised me most. For a long time, I thought there were only two choices. Hold on to the life I had, or let it go. I was wrong. There is another way. You can carry what mattered without refusing what remains. You can miss someone and still laugh. You can wish they were beside you and still go somewhere without them. You can remember what they liked and choose something different. You can love the word we and still learn to say I. Some mornings the house still feels too quiet. I won't pretend otherwise. Sometimes I wake from a dream where Robert is alive. For a few seconds I forget. Then I remember. Those mornings are difficult. I make coffee. Sometimes in his blue mug. I sit near the window. I let myself miss him. Then Thursday comes. Flowers need trimming. Maya needs help. Nancy wants coffee. Caroline calls. Beth sends photographs. There is paint peeling near the back door that I keep promising to fix. There are places I haven't seen. There are books I haven't read. There are flowers I haven't arranged yet. Life doesn't replace Robert. It doesn't need to. It simply continues asking me to participate. At 78, I think that may be one of the hardest invitations grief gives us. Not to forget, not to move on, to participate again, to enter a room without the person who once entered beside us, to make a decision without asking what they think, to order the food they didn't like, to change the wall, to take the trip, to discover that our own name can still fill the blank line. A few weeks ago, I found the original travel brochure in a drawer, the one from the trip I couldn't book. I remembered sitting in that office. I remembered the empty line, traveling with. Back then, I thought leaving it blank meant something terrible. It meant Robert was gone. It meant I was alone. It meant half of my identity had vanished. Now, I would answer differently. Yes, Robert is gone. Yes, there are places I must go without him. But I am not half a person traveling through whatever years remain. I am Helen Mercer. I was Robert's wife for 52 years. I am Caroline and Beth's mother. I am a florist on Thursdays. I am Nancy's friend. I am a woman who likes green walls and pink tulips. Apparently, I also like Chinese food, although I'm still trying to find a restaurant that doesn't make everything too spicy. I am all of those things. Robert belongs inside my story. He does not have to be the end of it. Yesterday morning, I stood at the kitchen table arranging another bunch of tulips. I trimmed the stems, turned the vase, moved one flower slightly to the left. Then I stepped back. For a second, the old question appeared. Would Robert like these? I looked at the flowers. Pink, bright, a little uneven. Probably not. I laughed. Then I asked myself a different question. Do I? I did. So I left them exactly where they were. Sunlight crossed the green wall. The house was quiet. Robert was still part of it. His photograph was nearby. His chair was beside the window. More than half a century of memories lived inside those rooms. But something else lived there too. Me. And after all those years of saying we, I finally understood that learning to say I again wasn't a betrayal of the man I loved. It was simply the way the woman who loved him learned to keep living. If you've ever had to rediscover who you were after losing someone you loved, I'd be glad to hear your story. Sometimes sharing what we've learned helps someone else feel a little less alone. And if you'd like to spend more quiet time reflecting on love, loss, aging, and the lessons life teaches us slowly, I hope you'll subscribe and join me again. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself.